Hello everyone, and welcome back to HermitCraft Season 10. And I know what you're saying. Rendog, you're looking pretty snazzy in that new armor. I know, everybody. Look at this. Our brand new netherite trimmed golden armor of awesomeness that we spent most of last episode creating. And I think it looks really cool. It's supposed to be some sort of a space suit, right? A gigasuit, if you will. A suit that you would put on when exploring dangerous exoplanets. These lines and things, they're supposed to be cables and buttons and whatnot. You got to use your imagination a little bit to bring it to life, but I kind of like it. I think it looks pretty cool. I mean, if we look too closely, we look a little bit like Bumblebee from Transformers, but let's just pretend that this is a gigasuit, okay? Please. Anyway, welcome, guys. Welcome to this, the first of a number of pre-recorded episodes that I will be producing over the next couple of days for you guys. By the time you watch this, I will be in South Africa with my family. In fact, I might be, at this very moment that you're watching this, I might be having dinner with my fam, or walking on the beach with my brothers, or maybe just snoozing in a sunbeam or something. Either way, this episode is created before the now times, which you are currently in, or something. And with that in mind, I thought I would try and make these coming episodes something a little bit different, something a little bit special, and something that will pay homage to our original Minecraft Let's Play series all the way back in the day, basically 10 years ago or so when I first started doing YouTube on Minecraft on YouTube anyway. The way that I used to record back then is I had very little time to record, so I would just basically record myself playing Minecraft and I'd tell you guys a story, something that happened to me in my life, something that happened to me during childhood or something like this, and I would just tell you a story and play Minecraft at the same time, and that was it. That was the episode. No cuts, no cinematics, no nothing. Just a story and some block placing. And I'm thinking maybe over the next few episodes, I'm going to try and do 3 or 4 of these. We will try and do this sort of thing for this recording. I think it's going to be kind of fun. Also a bit of a challenge for myself as a producer, whether or not I can still do the one cut. Do I still have what it takes to ramble on for 30 or 40 minutes, but without much umming and ahhing, although there's already been quite a lot of that so far? Well, we're going to put it to the test today, guys. And we're going to be working on a very interesting little section of our exoplanet build over here. I would like to start working on a road that will connect the hangar bay to the Terra-M1, and that I think is going to start to bring our little world here together a bit. At the moment, it's just a bunch of buildings plonked down. They're not really connected in any meaningful way. The Giga Hut is connected to the main road over here, but the hangar bay isn't really connected to anything. You know, we need a road that comes up here to connect that, and then I started working on a road that might connect the hangar bay to the Terra-M-1. And I was thinking about like a pretty interesting block palette also. You know, because we're using so much mud out here, we need a block that's going to stand out a bit. And I was thinking that maybe the paths of our world could be gray as opposed to brown. At first I was experimenting with dirt or coarse dirt or something like this, or rooted dirt. But I think we just go for a higher contrast between the mud and the andesite. And of course the lore here is, because there's been so much walking back and forth between the hangar bay and the factory, we've kind of worn the mud away down to the rock layer below it, right? You know, we can think about this mud as, you know, centuries of sand blowing across the planet and laying down a bunch of mud and a bunch of sand, a little bit like Mars, I suppose. But beneath all of that sand and beneath all of that mud is still some rockage. And so that's going to be the path. Excuse me, Spider. You are kind of distracting me. Ooh, I got his head, though. That's good. Anyway, so yes, that's what we're going to be working on, guys. And while we're doing this, I want to tell you guys a bit of a story about a path that I once discovered when I was a very young teenager. And a path that perhaps led me to some knowledge that stuck within my brain now that I am no longer a teenager. And I don't know, perhaps the story might impart some knowledge to yourselves out there as we pursue this particular build and as we pursue this build that we call life. My goodness, this is getting way too deep already. This is why I don't do one cuts, everybody, right? We get way too philosophical, way too quick. I mean, it is pretty much about 10:45 in the morning right now. I've got a lovely cup of coffee over here that I've been nursing, trying to figure out exactly how to start this episode, what to say, how to begin. You know, back in the day when I used to do these story episodes, it used to be a lot easier for me to get into the flow because I was literally hamstringed by the amount of time that I had to make these episodes. Of course, when I first started on YouTube, I was working full-time in London, and the only way that I could produce Minecraft episodes in a timely manner, should I say, was to wake up early in the morning, at about 5 in the morning, record an hour straight of Minecraft, and then cut it up into 4 videos of 15 minutes apiece. And those would be my episodes. And of course, it was kind of a challenge because I was living with people at the time in a house share. So, you know, I had to also try not wake them up by shouting at the screen. So often you can hear me trying to talk quite softly, like talking a little bit like this, you know, so that I don't wake up my housemates because I'm recording it at 5 in the morning. But yes, because of the fact I had such limited time, I needed to find a way to make videos that would be quick-ish to produce, but also interesting enough for the audience to enjoy, right? You know, I'm not exactly the most talented Minecrafter, so, you know, I need other ways to hold my audience, other than being an amazing redstoner or something like that. And so I decided I'd try and hold my audience with some interesting tales from my childhood. And, you know, I mean, I wouldn't say that I've had, like, the most unique childhood. In fact, I think my childhood in general was pretty standard and nothing too exciting about it. But I did manage to have a couple of interesting experiences throughout my life that have certainly changed who I am today, or at least influenced the man that I have become. Although some might argue that I play Minecraft for a living, so defining myself as a man at this point is perhaps questionable. But yes, this one particular story I'd like to tell you is a story about a path. I guess a path that started as a real physical path, but led to perhaps a more philosophical path, and perhaps even led to the path upon which I follow this very day. Now, to start the story, we have to go all the way back to when little Rendog was approximately, I don't know, I must have been maybe 14 years of age. So when I was a young teenager. And before we can even begin the story, I need to build a bit of context, because the story is certainly molded by the situation in which I found myself at this time in my life. So at this time in my life, I was a couple of years in to a boarding school in South Africa. And this was a really awesome boarding school, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. It was about 6 hours drive away from the capital city in which I was living, which was Johannesburg, of course. And to get there was quite a mission. In fact, usually if my parents didn't drive me to school, I would take a bus from Johannesburg all the way to the school. And this bus would take about 6 to 7 hours to get there. And, you know, it was quite a drive to get to the place. And the school was in the most beautiful setting that you can ever imagine. Sort of nestled in between the rolling hills of this beautiful part of South Africa. And, you know, the school was basically in the middle of nowhere, in a sort of valley of mountains, surrounded by farmlands and small holdings and some tribal settlements and whatnot. Very beautiful, very picturesque, but kind of out of the way of society in general. You know, the closest town or city, I suppose, to the school was maybe a 30-minute drive away on a sort of small winding road to get there. So essentially, the boys that went to this boarding school, all of us, we were kind of, once we were dropped off, that's where we were for the next 3 months or so. There was no escape. There was no sneaking out, you know, to go to the city, to go meet girls at the club or whatever. There was none of that. It was us and the school and the nature, the beautiful natural surroundings around us. And over the course of the first couple of years that I was there, I started to realize that there was a lot more to the school than just the buildings that I was, you know, living in, the classrooms that I was going to, or, you know, the mess hall that I'd go eat lunch in. outside of the boundaries of this school that was, made by man, was beautiful, amazing nature, forests and hills, lakes, railway tracks from the early part of the century leading off into tunnels through mountains and beautiful streams and all sorts of incredible environment, all scattered around the school. And as time progressed, I became more and more curious about what might be out there in this in this beautiful landscape that surrounded the school. And as I got a little bit older and a little bit more confident, I suppose, on the weekends, I started to go on some adventures out into the middle of nowhere. Now, when I first started going on these adventures, I remember asking some of my friends at the time if they wanted to come with me. But this school was quite focused on sport and those sort of things. It was a sort of a physical activity school rather than an adventurous artistic school, I suppose. And most of my friends were a lot more interested in playing football on the weekends or something. Because you see, on the weekends, after a long week of classes and whatnot, on a Sunday, we had a rule that was called out of bounds. Now, ironically, this rule was not exactly what it said on the tin. You know, when you hear the words out of bounds, it sounds like you are expected to leave the school, right? To get out of the bounds of the school. But you weren't really permitted to leave the boundaries of the school. In fact, the bounds that this rule referred to was simply the buildings of the school. You were expected to leave your dormitories and the classrooms and the TV rooms and the recreational rooms, and you were expected to go and spend Saturday and Sunday afternoons outside. On Saturdays, it was usually sport, football or rugby or something like this. But on Sundays, you were expected to go and spend some time on the fields, hanging out with your friends, or chilling in the courtyards or whatever. I don't know. I don't really know what other kids did, because I just started to take out of bounds quite literally, and I would quite literally go out of bounds. In the mornings, we would have breakfast after church at about 7:30, and at this point, I would pack a backpack full of sandwiches and sausage rolls and anything that I could yoink from the breakfast hall that morning. And of course, I would take a couple bottles of water and stuff like that, and I would just ram them into my backpack. And my mission for the Sunday was to head out of bounds from the school and go on an adventure and try and find stuff. I mean, I don't even really know what I was looking for. Mostly I was looking for artifacts, right? Like anything interesting, anything cool. I remember finding some old coins and stuff at the base of this weird, almost like a trash heap or trash pile of broken cars and bottles. I think it was maybe like a rubbish dump, I suppose, like a scrap dump or something, like where the people that lived on the estate of the school would just go and chuck their things. There were old Jeeps and cars and metal sheets and things like that. And in and amongst all of that rubbish, I found lots of cool artifacts, like this old coin that I mentioned. I also found like a really cool, what it was basically like a long strip of metal that I fashioned into a sword. It was basically like a long, sword-like strip of metal, and I got some linen or something, some cloth or something like that. I think I might have ripped up one of my pillowcases to make like a handle for the sword. And I used to bury the sword out there in the wilderness, and on the Sunday trips when I used to go out there, I used to go pick up the sword, because there's orcs and stuff out there, everybody. You have to be safe. You never know what's waiting for you around the corner. I mean, at the time I was reading Lord of the Rings, so I was very inspired in seeing orcs and stuff everywhere. Hey, X! Can't chat right now, in the middle of a story. Oh my goodness, that is an absolutely ridiculous amount of shulker boxes. I certainly don't need that many shulker boxes. But thank you, Asiba. Oh my goodness, guys. It's so difficult to make these videos these days. This is what I'm saying. How are you supposed to make a single take story video when you got beautiful hermits coming to say hello? I feel so bad now. The thing is, Zuman and I can chat for hours. We're such good mates, so we'll end up chatting forever, and then I'll just forget where I was in the story. I've already forgotten where I was in the story. Oh, dang it! By the way, how's the road looking? Let's get into the free cam view and just have a quick look. I like the shape of it. It's looking nice. It's got a nice sort of bend here, and then a re-bend there. That's looking pretty good, eh? I like it. Okay, so let's add some details around the sides of the road, and this is where we'll get going with some coarse dirt, some normal dirt, some rooted dirt. We'll get some granite accents in there, I think, and that should be pretty good. Yeah, cool. Anyway, so where were we? Where are we? Oh yes, so the sword. I fashioned the sword out of a strip of metal and some cloth, and I used to bury it about 1 kilometer outside of the school, up in the mountains, or on the side of the mountain that I used to climb. And on the way out there, I used to go get the sword, and then I'd spend the afternoon pretending that I was, running away from orcs and Nazgul and whatnot. And, I'd hack up bushes or something. I'd pretend that like a bush was an orc or something, and then I'd take it out with my my sword of Galadriel or whatever. Anyway, I was 14. Okay, I mean, please, I was the most atypical little 14-year-old boy that you've ever met. Not interested in anything other than fantasy, magic cards, StarCraft. Wasn't even interested. I know this is hard to believe, but I had no interest in girls at this time. I mean, I know it's insane to believe, but StarCraft was my girlfriend at the time. Okay, I might have said too much. Anyway, so yes, I used to go on these adventures. Now, let me try and expand the world a little bit for you. Okay, so the school was sort of in this mountain valley, and behind the school was a very deep valley that culminated in a very there were two sort of not mountains but high hills on either side. You know what the best way to do this is? I'm going to build it for you. Okay, so check it out. This is what it looks like. Yeah, this is good. So here's the school, right? Here's the school. Behind the school was a valley, right? We had like a hill on this side and a hill on this side. And then in the middle of the hill was a little stream that used to run. And if you followed this stream for about 2 kilometers, you would get all the way up to another mountain over here where the stream originated from. And the stream originated from pretty high near the top of it. There was a little spring up there. And so my weekly adventure was to travel from the school, follow the river, and, play along the riverbank. I used to spend maybe a couple hours in the bottom of that valley, finding tadpoles and frogs and doing all sorts of things. I used to make little towns for the tadpoles. I would sort of dig out something like this and put some sticks here and let the water flow from the stream into this area. And then I'd stick the tadpoles in there and pretend that they had a little city or something going. I mean, look, I was, I had a very vivid imagination, okay? But yes, I used to follow this stream all the way up to its source at the top of the mountain, about 2 kilometers or so away from the school grounds. And near the top of that mountain, one day I was up there, I discovered what looked to be a well-trodden path of some kind. To this day, I'm unclear whether it was a human path or whether it was an animal path. My suspicion is that it was perhaps a combination of the two. More likely started as a deer path or something like that, and then used by the local communities as a travel path between the tribal areas and the dirt road, upon which this mountainside was nestled. By the way, this road is actually a perfect position to explain a little bit more, right? So if the mountainside with the spring was over there, and the school was over here, there was a dirt road, a farm road that ran along the side of the school all the way around the back. And from the top of this mountain, you could get down to the road to get back to the school, or to travel all the way deep into the rural lands of that part of South Africa. So between the school and that road was a valley here. And to get there was this road. So that actually puts it all into context quite nicely, because Sometimes I would follow the road. I would just walk along the road if I wanted to get to the spring faster. But if I wanted to go on a more scenic route, I would go through the valley from the school. So anyway, this was my weekly adventure. At least whenever I could, I would try and go on this adventure to the spring, because the spring was really awesome. I used to drink water out of it and collect some of the water in plastic bottles to take back to school for the week. And it was very pretty, very natural, you know. It was a great experience. I mean, even at that age, I probably didn't really understand the beauty of it. I just thought it was really cool. And my imagination could run wild. And, you know, what I started to discover during this time also was that even though when I first started going on these adventures, I felt a little bit alone because none of my friends wanted to do it. I suppose it was pretty weird, you know, to sort of head out into nature. I think a lot of people thought that I was getting up to no good out there, you know, like going out there to imbibe things that I shouldn't be imbibing, so to speak, you know, the naughty things that teenagers can sometimes get up to. But I wasn't interested in any of that stuff. I was interested in exploring my imagination and you know, finding new stuff on the weekends, finding new places to build forts or new places to make a tadpole sanctuary and whatnot. But I can definitely see now, in retrospect, that it probably looked a little bit suspicious. You know, like I was up to no good out there, and the other boys were probably a little bit nervous to come with me in case that they got caught. Of course, what I was doing was not allowed. You weren't allowed to leave the grounds like this. So I was, in fact, breaking the rules, quote unquote. But what I did slowly start to realize during the course of these adventures is that I actually liked it that way. This was something that I was starting to really enjoy, that being in my own company. I started to find my true nature, which, as some of you guys who have been with me for a very long time will know by now, is much more akin to a real-life hermit than a sociable creature. I'm certainly introverted, although it may not seem that way. In reality, when it comes to social settings and whatnot, I am much happier on my own than in the company of others. And in fact, I have been working my entire life to ensure that now, where I am now, at this point in my life, I would be basically where I was when I was 14. Basically following my own paths and doing it on my own. However, all of that being said, there is some important things to remember and, you know, to understand about being alone. Perhaps some of you guys out there are feeling the same way right now. Maybe some of you younger folks are starting to realize that you are reclusive by nature, and you are starting to enjoy spending time with yourself and realizing that you don't really need others that much. And that's all great and cool. However, it can lead to some pretty serious situations that I think you should be aware of. And certainly situations that I became aware of during these adventures. And so we come to the crux of the story, the path. Now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, there was the spring on the side of this mountain. Hello, Azuma again. Dude, I can't chat X. I'm so sorry, dude. I'm trying to keep my mind on track here. Yes, it was me. It was me. I bought all the rooted dirt. Yes, it was me. It was me. Yes. Oh, dang it. The distractions have thrown me off course, guys. Had to do a little cut there. My apologies. Gotta get my mind back on track. There's all this stuff happening in chat, and I'm trying to keep focused on telling a story. Okay, so where did we get to? Yes, we're talking about the art of being alone, I suppose, is what it comes down to. The art of being alone. For all of you guys who are perhaps going on this path of selfness or loneness, I am excited for you. I think it's great. And once you discover how to be with yourself and not be affected negatively by it, I think it's a really great way to live, especially if it's a part of your nature. Of course, if it's not your nature, you won't feel like doing it. It won't feel natural to you, and you certainly shouldn't force it. But if it is a part of your nature, then I think you should embrace it. But with that being said, there are some things that you should know about the art of being alone. Number one, just because you're alone doesn't mean you do not impact others. In fact, being alone usually means you impact others in a more dramatic way than you might actually think you do. And in order to expand on this idea, I'll need to tell you guys the rest of the story. So, it was one beautiful Sunday morning. I remember it being quite chilly. It was probably sometime in October or something like this, where the weather in South Africa isn't exactly freezing, but it's not exactly warm. I remember waking up in the morning and seeing some dew on the grass outside. And as I packed my my backpack to go on my adventure, I made sure to take a jersey along with me because at the time it was still a little bit crispy outside. But it was one of those beautiful mornings where as I was walking through that valley, the sun was just glistening off of the plants and stuff, off of the dewdrops on the plants. And there was that smell of ozone in the air coming off of the ground. And it was just me, my backpack, and an entire afternoon of orc slaying ahead of me. And I was very excited to get out there because that particular day, I had decided that for the first time ever, I was going to push my adventuring further than I had done in the past. At the very top of that mountain, where that spring was, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, was a little path that ran over the top of the mountain and down into another valley. And I had always been a little bit too nervous to actually take the plunge and do that adventure and go further away from the school. Because at the very top of that spring, I could still see the school down there at the end of the valley, right? If we remember back to me telling you about the layout of the land, this was the top of the mountain. The school was there. The path that I'm talking about led all the way down into another valley. And it was on this particular day that 14-year-old Rendog decided we were going to get brave and we were going to push the limits and we were going to further explore and see if there were any orcs down in that other valley on the other side of things. And so my mission began. All alone, I headed out with my provisions. I picked up my sword and I headed up to the top of the mountain to the spring. And I looked across the valley before me, and what a glorious sight it was. There was a layer of thin fog still remaining from the coldness of that morning, and the sun was glistening off of all of the dew that was still clinging onto the leaves and the grass blades below. And all the way in the distance, all the way over there, I saw another mountain peak rising up, almost like a spike in the distance. And I wondered to myself if I would be able to get there on that particular day. It was probably a few kilometers in the distance, maybe a few more than that, but it seemed like quite a long way away and seemed like quite an interesting goal to try and achieve. And so I went forth with my sword in hand, and I crossed that barrier and started to traverse down into that second valley. The adventure continued for most of the day, and certainly I don't remember the details. This was a very, very long time ago, but I have no doubt that along the path I found very many amazing discoveries and had a lot of fun hacking away at plants, pretending that they were orcs and whatnot. I do remember, however, getting to the base of a massive cornfield, or at least I think it was corn. We in South Africa, we call it mealies, which, yes, you guys will know as corn. And the plants were really high. There were no, I can't remember if they were cobs yet or something, but the plants were like pretty high up, like taller than I was as a kid. And for me, this was basically the perfect opportunity to become the ultimate orc slayer in the existence of the world. Because these plants were perfect for slaying. When I raised my sword and slashed away at the side, at one of these plants in this field, they would just be sliced in half like a Jedi slicing apart a Sith. And the more of these corn plants that I sliced in twain, the more absorbed I got in this and the more fun I started to have. And so deeper into the field I went, hacking and slashing at the orcs and the Nazgul. having an absolute blast, making the noises with my mouth, no doubt, and probably talking dialogue also. You know, you shall not pass, filthy orc, slash. However, as my imagination took me and as I got deeper and deeper involved in this adventure that I was on, so I started to lose my bearings. And I don't know how much time passed, but after a certain amount of time, I emerged from the side of one of these fields. Also, by the way, my apologies to that farmer. I must have hacked quite a few of their plants to shreds that day. And I do apologize. I don't know if that farmer is still with us and still watching, but if you are watching this, I do apologize about that. The child within me took hold. I could not resist, and I had to do damage. But anyway, I emerged out of this field, and I realized that I had completely lost my bearings. I had no idea where I was in relation to this new valley. Of course, the valley on the other side, I was very, very familiar with, as I'd adventured there many, many Sundays. But this particular valley, I was clueless. There were a number of dirt roads crisscrossing. I could see 2 or 3 roads in different directions. I had no idea which of these roads was the correct one. I couldn't see the school. I couldn't see any buildings. All I could see was beautiful, wild South African mountainside and farmland. And for the first time in all of my adventures out there in the middle of nowhere, I felt a panic rising in my stomach. We're going quite a way back now, everybody. There were no mobile phones, no cell phones. There was internet, but certainly no mobile devices that you could use to connect to the internet. I was out there on my own with no ways of communicating with the world around me. And the only way back was for me to figure out how I got there in the first place and start the long trek back on the path that I followed to get there in the first place. Very, very silly of me, to be honest. But herein is the lesson that I learned. Because as I started to panic, and as my water supply started to run out, I had like a liter of water in a couple of plastic bottles over the course of the whole day. I guess my survival instinct started to kick in, and I just started to work out what would be the best way to try and get back home. And I figured that if I just got to one of the roads and walked along the road in whichever direction it went, eventually I would come across some building or a farm or somebody with a telephone, a landline that I could call the school or call my mum, because of course I didn't know the school's number off by heart, so I'd have to phone my mum and tell her that I was lost in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know. My instinct was to try and find another human being. Ironically, even though my goal was to be out there on my own, ironically in the end it was, I needed others to rescue me from this rather precarious situation that I had put myself in. And so I trekked forth toward the road and and started walking along the road, trying to find a bit of farmland or something like this. Anything that I could find a human being. However, it was a Sunday, so I suspect most of the farmers were indoors, having lunch with their family, having a snooze after a very busy week of working on the land. And there was just nothing. There was nobody. There was no life anywhere. And this was now approaching about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I suppose. And the touch of orange was starting to hit the sky as the sun was heading toward its final resting place for the day. And I started to realize that I might actually be in some pretty serious trouble at this point, because I wasn't finding anything. At one point, I even felt like I was going around in a circle because things started to look quite familiar. And I think what was happening is that I was starting to panic, and I was becoming, I was starting to lose my bearings quite badly and quite dramatically. And so I was panicking, and I was starting to get really concerned that I was going to be trapped out here. In fact, I was starting to think about, well, what do I do now? Do I sleep out here? Like, do I find somewhere to sleep? Like, what do I do if the sun goes down? And of course, the sun did go down. And there I was in the middle of nowhere, walking along this road. I mean, I just, at one point I thought, well, if the sun's going down, I might see the lights of the farmhouses at some point, right? And that will give me a really great clue. Then I can just walk toward the lights of a farmhouse. But of course, South Africa is maybe not the greatest place for a 14-year-old to be trapped out in nature after sundown. Certainly not at all. And it was starting to become a pretty dire situation. It didn't ever become full night, however. I'm happy to say that I didn't end up having to sleep in a tree stump or, some crazy dramatic thing like this, because roll call at the school after Out of Bounds, I think was at 5:30 or 5 o'clock, I think it was, because dinner time was 6 o'clock, if I recall correctly. And so everybody had to be back in their dormitories by 5:30 or 5:30 for roll call. And if you weren't at roll call, then of course the teachers would know that you were missing, or that they needed to use the intercom device across the school to try and find out where you were. So as the time for roll call back at school came and passed, obviously the teachers were informed that I was not at roll call, and they probably started to look around to see if I was I was usually at the music school sometimes, practicing piano and things like this, as I'd spent a little bit of time at the music school sometimes, at the music department. But yeah, by about 6 o'clock, I suppose it was quite obvious to them that I was nowhere to be found. And I pretty much to this day feel very guilty about this, because you can imagine the panic that starts to set in. If you are a teacher out there, I would just like to commend you and thank you for your incredible service that you give to humanity, especially when you have to deal with idiot kids like the 14-year-old Rendog, who decides to go on an epic hike into the middle of nowhere and gets lost when the sun goes down. Yeah, teachers, you are the best. Anyway, so obviously panic started to set in, and the teachers went out looking. And I don't remember the exact details. I assume that probably my best friend told them that that I go out of bounds, because I used to ask him to come, like I told you, I asked him to come with me, and he said no. So he probably knew that I was out of bounds, and maybe my best friend told them that I would go out and hike around the school, because just as the sun was starting to set and it was starting to get really, really dark, I suddenly spotted some headlights on the distant horizon of the road that I was walking on. By this stage, my water was out. I was sunburnt. I was scared. I think I probably was even crying, but don't tell the ladies that, okay? Ladies, I was as strong as Aragorn. I was hacking orcs as the sun was setting and the Nazgul were coming at me from the darkness of the forests around me. I was defending them blindfolded. No, I was probably panicking and drizzling a little bit. Anyway, the headlights came closer and closer, and in a massive puff of smoke that was following behind the car, this station wagon drove up to me and came to a very sudden halt, and the dust came from behind it like a dust storm and flushed over me into my eyes and into my mouth. And it was all quite dramatic, and I wasn't exactly sure what was going on. But the next human being that I saw was my English teacher, who had been obviously frantically driving around the country roads outside of the school, trying to see if he could find me. And there I was, somewhere probably, 4 or 5 kilometers away from school. And he had discovered me. And when I first saw him, I panicked. I thought he was going to be extremely angry. But he ran straight up to me, gave me a hug, and got a blanket out of the trunk of his car, and wrapped me in the blanket and put him into the car and took me back to school. And I was banned from Out of Bounds for a year, I think. After that incident, I wasn't allowed to leave my room during Out of Bounds for the rest of the year, I believe. But this was quite the experience, quite a dramatic moment in my life for a number of reasons. Number one, it was the first time that I really pushed myself to try something dangerous, I suppose you could say, right? dangerous and also stupid. It was a young version of me, I suppose, testing the boundaries, seeing what I could get away with, seeing how strong I was, whether I was capable of surviving, and going into unknown territory, right? And being able to navigate it. However, number two, what it made me realize is that, yes, it's great to be brave, and it's great to be on your own, and it's all wonderful to go on these adventures and whatnot. But if you are going to be self-sufficient and alone and do things on your own, you must always realize that your impact on others doesn't go away. That people care about you, that people worry about you, that people protect you when you need it. And in order for them, in order for you to not stress people out, you need to take the necessary precautions that come along with being alone. It's almost like the cost of being alone is making sure that those people in your life will not be affected by your aloneness, or at least will not be negatively impacted by your aloneness. Me going out there on my own and not caring about the consequences of getting lost, or at least not thinking about it, caused an extreme amount of panic over at the school. It probably drained a bunch of resources for the teachers. Those teachers who were trying to enjoy their Sunday afternoon with their families back home were now driving around the country lanes of South Africa at sunset trying to find a lost child. You know, I caused a lot of stress on this day. And I caused a lot of stress simply because I wanted to do something that was cool. And, you know, not thinking about the potential consequences that it might have on others. With this lesson learned, if I had were to do things differently, what I would have done instead is that I would have, you know, told a teacher exactly what I wanted to do and got permission to go on that adventure. And if the teacher had said yes, I would be able to do it. And if the teacher had said no, then I would just, you know, I wouldn't do it. That way, if I did get lost out there, at least the teacher would know where I was. I mean, of course, I probably shouldn't have done any adventuring at all, because even getting permission from the teacher means that if something did go wrong, I was going to be putting them out of their Sunday to come and find me. But certainly there was a better way to go about that particular adventure. And I suppose there's no real right or wrong answer as how I could have done that adventure, but I think the clear message is that if you are going to be a lone wolf in life, make sure that your lone wolfing has as little negative impact on those around you as possible, because those around you are not lone wolves. They function in a different way. And the lesson that I learned from this particular moment in time was that despite your own nature, always be aware that others have their own nature too. And it's really important that we try to empathize at all times when we make our own decisions in life, when we decide to do weird things. Is what we're about to do impacting others? And if so, how can we minimize that impact? So we made a road. It looks pretty cool, I think. I think this bit over here needs a little bit of work, this connection here. But all in all, that's turned out pretty nice. I would like to add a little bit more foliage and whatnot to the outsides here. I know this is supposed to be an alien planet, and, you know, grass and stuff is probably not supposed to be growing here. I might experiment with a different foliage for the grass, but the thinking is that as we're walking back and forth from the mud factory to the hangar bay, we're dropping organic matter on the side of the road, and over the course of time, this organic matter has got seeds in it that we've brought from other planets, right? And that organic matter has sort of taken root and started to grow. And I don't know, when you travel along the road, it feels pretty good. I mean, for me, the key is to make sure that the road is very distinguishable from high above. And my feeling is we probably have way too many squirter pods in this configuration. I might take a few of those squirter pods out just to variate the road a little bit. It almost looks like those squirter pods are, you know, of lampposts or something. Speaking of which, we're definitely going to need lampposts for these roads. that'll really tie the room together. So maybe if we replace some of these squirt pods with lamps, that will make the whole thing come together quite nicely. But having a look at the timer of this video, 45 minutes in. And that is the first of this story series completed. I have no idea what I said. I hope that I got my message across. If not, I hope it was an interesting and entertaining story at the very least. But yes, indeed, that is the tale of the path down which I went when I was 14, a path that led both to discovery and learning. And that is the best kind of path that you can have, I suppose. Whether the outcome is negative or positive, as long as at the end of that path you learn something. That's a decent lesson to take from the metaphorical concept of pathage. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you in the next episode with another story.